Ready? We're up and running. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Remington, council member and mayor pro tem for City of Duval. This evening for our City Council Committee of the Whole agenda, we'll go ahead and call to order for Tuesday, August 18th, 2020. It's 5:31. We have three items on our agenda this evening. Specifically, we have a 2020 comprehensive plan amendment. That's a yearly endeavor that we have and a chance for us to take a look at amendments to that plan. We have the 275th Avenue Northeast Complete Streets project, Steve Laniszewski has offered to take our questions. We've had several items come up, so it'll be a chance for us to just bring those forward. And then finally, we have our department updates, Community Development Planning Department. We did have a request to move item 2 to the first item. So I would just, without any objection from council, we'll do the 275th Avenue Northeast Complete Street project first. Any concerns with that? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and do that. Well, let's start with good of the order. Is there anything council or staff would like to share? I don't see any hands up. All righty, well, we'll move on to our first item. It's 275th Avenue, Northeast Complete Streets. We do have a grant, I believe in the amount of $200,000 to help with that. Many of our larger projects, especially street projects, are we're really dependent as a smaller town on those grants. They're very important, and we appreciate staff for keeping an eye on the availability and bringing those forward. I made a list of some of the questions. And the questions aren't meant to say, hey, these are problems. They're just questions that come up, and many of these questions have been answered. Laura, you have your hand up?
I am sorry to add to this party, but I just found out that Troy has an appointment at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
And he's giving the presentation.
So I think we also were trying to cut back on some of Daniel's time because we thought there might be questions on 275th. But thank you for that. I'm happy to have Troy go first if Daniel can hang in with us for a little bit.
Absolutely, more than happy to.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Well, again, with council's go ahead, we'll stick with the original agenda. And it looks like everyone's okay. Laura, thank you for bringing that up. Troy, with that, let's go ahead and have you start off. So our first item will be 2020 comprehensive plan amendments.
All right. Hello, Mayor and City Council. It's been a while, I think, since I last spoke to you guys. So I'll keep it brief tonight because I don't have a whole lot to say. But anyway, with regards to our annual comprehensive plan amendments, this is the time of year that we wrap up proposed amendments to our comprehensive plan. So we have hearings before the Planning Commission and the City Council. But before we do that, we'd like to have a workshop just to kind of give you guys a heads up and again, making sure there aren't any questions or concerns before we go to hearing. So with the 2020 comprehensive plan amendments, those came out of our docket for 2020. And so the City Council, as you recall, approved the 2020 docket back in December. And on that docket, we had 5 proposed amendments. A couple of them were proposed amendments to the future land use map with concurrent rezones. And 3 of those were placeholders from Public Works for potential amendments to certain elements of our comprehensive plan should they need to move forward. So for this go around moving forward for the 2020 comprehensive plan amendments, we're only proposing to move 2 of the items forward, and those are both our future land use map amendments. The first one is the carryover that we've had for a couple of years. This is the rezone of the rec center. going from public facilities to residential 8 units per acre is the proposal. We as city staff are comfortable taking this off if city council doesn't anticipate surplusing this property in 2021. If the city council anticipates surplusing this property in 2021, then we would recommend continuing this on to the 2021 docket. The other future land use map amendment had to do with the down zone of 2 parcels here. So this is on the corner of 143rd Place and 3rd Avenue here. So these 2 properties are zoned R20, but this property here on the very corner of 143rd and 3rd is pretty heavily treed with exceptional trees. And part of the problem, just as a refresher, that we've had with potential development proposals for this piece in particular was that we were struggling with how to achieve the minimum density in that zone, which I believe is 16 units per acre, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Laura. And still maintain the number of exceptional trees. So as you recall, exceptional trees have additional protections above and beyond significant trees when it comes to protection and retention. And so at the R20 density, we had a bit of a conflict of making that balance work. The property to the west is heavily treed to the rear. Here, up here, closer to the street is pasture and lawn. There's a single family house on it right now. And I should mention this parcel here to the east isn't developed at all. Currently, it's currently all forested. So with this proposed amendment, city staff, obviously we've had a busy year and haven't had time to dive into further analysis of what this down zone would entail. So our recommendation for this proposed amendment is going to be to move it to the 2021 docket. And hopefully in the next year, we can have more time to do an in-depth analysis to make a better recommendation to City Council. So that's going to be that. The next steps going forward for the 2020 amendments is going to be a hearing before the Planning Commission on the 26th of August, and then with the City Council on September 1st. And that's all I had to mention, and I guess we'll open up for questions and discussion.
Questions from City Council members? Troy, are you looking for direction from council tonight on those 2 items, the rec center and then those 2 corner lots that you were proposing, both those we hold off till next year's comprehensive plan amendments?
Yeah, so what we would like to hear from council is particularly direction on the rec center, whether the council's interested in moving that to the 2021 docket or approving the rezone this year. That's always an option if the council's ready. But we would kind of like, our preference is if the council's not ready to make any kind of decision on the property to take it off the docket and address it at a later time. But particularly direction from the council on that item would be
Okay,
great.
well, thank you, Troy. So that's in front. Before I call on and get a couple of council members to speak, I'll just simply mention that my sense is that there's a lot of unknowns yet and that we're not quite ready to make a decision on it. But that's up to council as a whole. Councilmember McHenry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm good holding off for a little bit on that, especially with all the unknowns like you just mentioned. And I think if I recall, we're still utilizing the rec center currently for more social distancing for staff members. So I just think it's best to hold off at this time and follow what staff is recommending.
Good, thank you. Councilmember Langle.
I agree with Councilmember McHenry's comments. And based on some of our retreat discussions, it seems like looking at the rec center and doing more of a deep dive is appropriate for the future. And let's not add to staff responsibilities in this current environment and take it off the docket.
Other council members, Mayor, do you want to weigh in? Councilmember Naplin.
Yeah.
Want me to go
I-
first?
I'd be happy to weigh in, Mayor Pro Tem. Did you want me to go first or Councilmember Napland?
I'll let Jennifer go first, and then I'll have you, Mayor, you can kind of follow up for us here.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I echo what has been said about the rec center. I do have a question about the 2 parcels. Is there a risk that if we don't move forward on downzoning to R12, that there would be an attempt to utilize it at R20 and it would, we would have a unfortunate or a less desirable outcome. So I don't really know what activity there is on that parcel. And I also am curious, R12 is still pretty dense. Is that a preferable density for a heavily treed lot? I don't know what options there are. It was the one that's presented is to R12. So anyway, I know a lot of people were very sad when the Toll Brothers project went in and all those very big trees came down. And maybe it'd be a win-win to have more flexibility on that lot to keep the trees. So that'd be a question for Director Thomas.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor. And I didn't know if Troy was going to answer it, so I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
I
I'm
didn't
gonna-
know.
no, so that's okay. So
Yeah.
Mayor and Council, Laura Thomas for the record, Community Development Director. So yeah, there's always going to be a risk if you don't rezone it. We have had some pre-applications on it. I would really call them general information meetings. The challenge is that we have to do an analysis to rezone it, and we want to look at how the tree policy is working in general as well. It doesn't mean that R12 is the zone that we have to pick. And what we can do is next year, if we choose to either carry it over or start over, we could look at other zoning designations. We chose R12 because it's what was adjacent to the property across, at least to the north and essentially to the south. But to the east, because of some additional constraints, including sensitive areas and trees, we did look at R8 zoning. So we could potentially look at R8 and R12 if that's the direction that council gives us. We'd like to obviously hold the hearing first and then, get hopefully some comments in from the community. And if we don't, then I would recommend, if council does want us to look at R8 and R12, that we then not carry it over. We actually redocket it and look at both the zones as a potential. I know that the parcel owners have not been super supportive in some cases of us downzoning their properties, and we did get some feedback on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Okerlander.
Thank you. Regarding the Stella Street rezone, my preference is to completely scrap the rezone just altogether. I think it was put on the agenda under a completely different council, and I think it's really a waste of resources to continue to look at a rezone when we don't even have a buyer or know what we're doing for the property. And I felt that way for a long time. And I just think now's not the time to do that. And I think we can also look back at previous appraisals and recognize that those appraisals are very little difference between the two. I think this is just one of those things that never should have gotten started. And I think it's time to let this one go until there's a plan.
Councilmember Brudnicki.
I would agree with the statement from the mayor in regards to just when I found out that whichever way we would go, the price of the property was about the same. And the goal was really to try to sell the property. it doesn't really make sense to me to then proceed with trying to rezone it. So my interest really is to sell the property, so.
Other comments or input? Councilmember Lingle.
I just wanted to really thank Troy. I mean, he has such a gentle spirit and he's so competent and he is so dedicated. And we really don't have a lot of money to put into planning functions, but he always tries to rise to the occasion. And my interactions with him, both as a citizen and as a council member, have always been so positive. So I just want to acknowledge that in a council meeting.
Well, thank
And
you.
he's one of those sort of unsung heroes at Duval City Hall. So thank
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's really deserved, Troy. We have watched how busy you've been. Every citizen that drives around town realizes somebody's busy, and it happens to be you and Director Thomas. We're hopeful to be able to get some additional support for you as well coming up here shortly. I hope that works out in that split position we're looking at.
I appreciate it.
So obviously, you know, there's been some discussion on a couple different ways on the rec property. My sense is overall, we're not quite ready to, as a council as a whole, it's not 100%, but it seems like the majority still aren't quite sure what to do at the rec center. And with budget coming through and using that building currently, it seems like, council, weigh in if I'm wrong, that we can let you know, Troy, that we'll hold off till next year to make a final decision. And it sounds like it's reasonable on the other two properties to get additional information to be able to help make a solid decision on that. So that makes sense as well. Anything that I've missed, council, on those items? Troy, do you have what you need?
Yes, I believe that answers what I need to know for going forward. So appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here tonight, and thanks for your 6 o'clock meeting. Sounds like you're busy.
Yep, never stops.
Thank you, Troy. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, we'll jump right back into the 275th Street topic. I took time to write down questions, and I'm going to repeat myself because this is way too important to miss. The questions don't indicate that there's big concerns. There are some concerns, but legitimately, there are times council just has questions on things that pop up. So Director Liniszewski kind enough to say, yeah, let's bring that forward. I realize some of these have been answered since our last meeting. Daniel Kinney weighed in. I thought he did an excellent job of providing some feedback legally. So here's the 10 things, Steve. I wrote down, others may not have questions, but I tried to be thorough and say these were some of the questions that came up. Sidewalk location next to the street versus a meandering. We've talked about that, but that was one. Clearing the trees and brush. I think originally it was more limited clearing, and now we're trying to get rid of all those blackberries up to the fence. Third question was about street lighting. Do we stub it in, or do we simply get those lights in now under this limited budget or monies we have for this project? The other part was street lights. There was a question, again, this was one that was, I think, answered by Mr. Kinney, that we buy the street lights and we give them back to PSE, and then we pay to maintain them. His answer to that, or feedback to us, was that it's not unusual to do that. It actually saves money in the long run. We purchase them, and then PSE takes it from there. They maintain them and take on everything from if there's lighting problems with the light bulbs or a vehicle hits it, then they take care of it. So in the long run, it sounds like that actually is a good thing financially. Item 4, cost, certainly the grant we had for 200,000, the cost came in just under double what that is, a little bit higher than I think that we anticipated for the entire project. The exercise equipment, there the question was, is there better use for the money? Is this the time to put that in or not? We've had feedback positively that from citizens that said, hey, great, we can't wait to get exercise equipment. And we've had feedback that said, don't waste the money on it. Item 6, available information. I know it's always tough to know what council is looking for. I know there's an arborist report and other information. We don't always get to see that. Just for the future, it'd be nice to know what's available on these projects and where we could go to get the info. Options, you know, I really appreciated Steve bringing forward several options on this. Those are kind of designed in to be able to control costs on it. If we needed to cut some things out to try to have a, well, just spending less of our monies. Item 8, intersection safety improvements. Not so much a question, it just came up that, hey, during this project, what can we do to improve safety at that main intersection at 150? We've got a fair amount of feedback from citizens that said, boy, if you're doing something out there, please improve safety for our children and families that are out walking. 9 was PSE property that we're improving. Is that a gift of public funds? Are we obligating ourselves to maintain that property since they own it? And again, I think Mr. Kenny did a great job providing some legal feedback on it. And I'm sharing this just because our citizens don't get a chance to always see it. But it was clear that it's not unusual if even though it's their property, and yes, we are improving it, but there's a public benefit to it. And that's kind of the key to it. And then my last one, 10, the grant itself, obviously we've put in to get the grant, they've approved it. It's not expected to pay the entire cost. And so part of that question is just, you know, we move forward thinking it might be about 200,000. Maybe that was our fault for assuming that. I think many thought it would likely cost more, but the actual cost, some of those bids came in quite a bit higher. So with that, Steve, I threw out a lot of stuff there. I think some of these have already been answered, and council would say, well, I'm not worried about that one anymore. But for our citizens, I wanted them to have a clear picture of all the questions that came up. And Steve, I'll leave it up to council to kind of weigh in if after you share some information, if we still have questions on these specific items. So with that, Mr. Laniszewski.
Good evening, everybody. Steve Laniszewski. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Public Works, staff and citizens, if they're out there. So I think it's been a couple weeks since the last council meeting. We had some discussion on the item, actually on the agenda based on the bids and bid rejection. So I thought, speaking with Pro Tem Remington, we were maybe just have a quick discussion. I'm sorry, my screen keeps getting dark and light on here, but so with that said, we did have a few conversations with some council members. I think they were good conversations, you know, questions, clarifications, thoughts. I think first and foremost, as council member Remington said, on options, you know, going back out to bid, identifying the taxes that are appropriate per the lines, you know, that should be clarified and is a must. Segregating out the activity areas, which we already had in an alternate, but also associating the landscape screening costs with that. So i.e. if we don't do the activity stations, we don't need landscape screening. So that's something to be said there. Street trees were fairly expensive. We are still trying to work out with PSE a change, but the tree types are very specific in what they will grow to. So not that PSE has said no, but we haven't found a real good match for the tree type that they require. So we're still looking into some alternatives. You know, the city standards are the city standards, so we try to go by them to the best of our abilities. And in this case, with some street trees, we'll be removing some of those because of some of the sidewalk that will come back towards the curb line, and then some of those tree stands that will stay. So there is that, but also the bigger cost, and we were able to confirm some of that information through a contractor. They were a subcontractor on landscape from the project, who actually did the implementation on Main Street years ago. And she was very open, and a lot of the costs are for the materials to be brought in for planting backfill. We have a very specific call out in our code on what you plant material with. So I talked to planning, you know, we still have to go to bid not knowing exactly what we have, but if we have decent soils on site, we can use our consultant to verify, you know, the planning consultant, not the engineering consultant, but planning consultant help us verify if those in fact are reasonable soils to use in lieu of something that we could bring in to save some costs. So those are kind of the other opportunities we have at hand. You know, rebidding, some of the conversation on just taking a project out to bid. Just to be clear, right, when we do that, there are costs that contractors incur. It is encouraged if we're going to put a bid out, we are obviously serious about that. So that was something to consider. We had to throw this one out, but they weren't real irritated. Of course, they wanted to try to get into contract because, you know, change orders are easy ways to make things not as clear. So, but we have the same folks who bid it before still put their name in again. It's a restart, so it's not just like the same people are automatically included. So that's encouraging. Made the point of clarifications in the bid documents and trying to move forward on that end. But I think the PSC issue was an interesting issue. The light poles, should they go in, they are an alternate, you know, would be in all these instances in land that is PSC land adjacent to the right of way. We're splitting hairs probably on the north side of 150th by the park because there's about a foot of land, but it does curve because the property is square. So, and then on the southern end, the road cuts across the PSC corridor in and of itself. So that's, again, interesting fallacies of the past, I guess. So there was that. I think timing, you know, the bid is important to get out there. We are obligated to fulfill this installation by February of 2021, so we're getting tight on time. We will be opening the bid on the 25th for hopeful return to council on the 1st of September. I think those are the major changes and kind of updating. Looking over my Councilmember Remington's questions. I think it was clear too, you know, some of the scope creep is obviously brought on by myself. This was thought of prior to my, you know, return to Duval, and I think the intersection safety and lighting is important, and we are there now. We're going to be tearing up the intersection for a crosswalk, so it does make sense to implement those things to the best of our abilities. So just, I guess that's kind of the gist of, you know, returning and discussing and just making sure everybody's on the same page as we do move forward in hopes to, you know, have a productive and successful project for the city and the community. With that, Councilor Remington, I'm open for questions or whatever discussion we want to have. And
good. Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the updates. Are there specific questions from council members? Councilmember Langle. I think we have you muted, Dorothy. That's okay.
I have several points about the project. I've had, I think, very substantive and important discussions with the director. And I'll just put out there my thoughts about the project. Because I've thought about this project a bit, mostly because it was one of the first project grant applications I saw after being appointed to council. And this doesn't address all the 10 things, so I'll go fast. I support the additional electronic work at the crosswalk. Now that my concern clarifying gift of public funds related to the light pole has been resolved, I'm fine with stubbing in the light pole, which was, I think, alternate 3. And I'm okay with including the light pole as long as we include that as part of the project budget, as part of the record. Honestly, I wouldn't care how much money we had. I don't support the exercise equipment. I don't think it's a good location. My experience with small park areas like that is that that's not the best use of our parks money or public money. And related to that, and this tied into my question, an email I had with Steve, is that, you know, can we afford under any circumstances, any location, to be taking on more land, particularly if private land, to maintain it? Now, as I understood it from the legal memo, taking on the responsibility of PSE's land is covered under the auspices of a recreation program. So it seems to me that if we don't do that alternate, and I guess I'm putting my thoughts out completely out there, then, and it's tied to both the landscaping cost, but also the ongoing cost of whatever portion of land we would be taking on of PSEs to maintain. So just, you know, I guess from the very beginning, as a new council member, I understood that this project was probably going to cost more than $200,000. So I long ago accepted that as part of the situation. And I've tried to detail what I support and what I don't support succinctly in the list, and look forward to hearing from other council members.
Thank you. Councilmember Napland.
Thank you for adding this to the agenda. I think it's an important discussion, and there's been an awful lot of interest from the public. So I'm excited to see there's quite a few attendees, and we're happy you're here. So one thing I want to mention is I completely agree on the soil. My native soil is so much better than the very, very expensive premium garden soil I purchased. Everything grows better in the native soil. It adapts better. It would be a real shame to scrape that away and then bring in some other manufactured soil. So I hope we can look at that. And the other question I had, that landscaping portion was very high. And there's a grading plan, and it does look like we go quite a ways in. And I just want to make sure they aren't bringing in any soil that's trying to level off the whole corridor, because that corridor is kind of all over the place. And I just want to make sure that we are not trying to make that mowable and get that all graded out to where it's something we're planning on maintaining. And I don't know if that's something Director Laniszewski can provide. And I have another question, but I'll let him answer that first.
No, and some of those catchment lines are just areas of where anticipated disturbance would go that we would need to revegetate with a seed mix, so the hydro seed element. Yeah, we're not intending to bring in fill anywhere we don't need it to either A, come up to grade, or B, provide a 3-to-1 slope adjacent to whatever we would fill per our code, which is our slope standard. Right, so at the fill a foot, I would have to run a little grade out 3 feet wide to go 3-to-1 over, just to not have a straight drop.
So there's no intention to try to get heavy machinery in there and flatten that whole thing out. Okay. And then the other comment about the play equipment, and it's really sad for me to give this feedback, because the funny thing is, when I found out about this project, that there was a potential to put this exercise equipment in, it was when I had sent, I can't remember if I sent it to Director Thomas or to you, Director Laniszewski. I had been at a park and there was this very similar exercise equipment, and I had sent it over to the city saying, wow, this is really neat, it'd be a great amenity. And Steve said, I've got some great news for you. This is so exciting. I think it was you, I can't remember. it was a long time ago. Was it you? Yeah? Do you vaguely remember that? Anyway, could have been someone else. But I think what concerns me is the location and even some of the feedback where there was positive feedback about it. What it was reminding me is some of the people who would likely use it would be that age group that no longer wants to play on the play structure, maybe is preteen, younger. And when I've seen this exercise equipment in different parks, it's usually along a trail, not next to a busy road. And that is a very busy road. We don't, you know, Judd Park has fencing just to make sure no one gets distracted and runs into the street, or, you know, it's contained in some way. So I'm just not sure that this is the best place to invest in something like that. I think there are other places that might work better. I'm just not sold on this location. Just that is such a busy road. And I do think it will attract some younger kids. And typically where we have playground type equipment, we would never have it next to a road without some kind of barrier. So just thinking more about that, I'm just not sold on it. I do agree. The safety improvements at the intersection, I think are wonderful. I'm glad that that was brought up by staff. The lighting, I think would be helpful. So that's my feedback. It was kind of long-winded. I apologize.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
One quick follow-up.
Steve, go ahead. If you want to give feedback, and afterwards we'll call on Councilmember McHenry.
Sure, and you know, it's bid as an alternate for a reason, so that's totally fine on the activity stations, but they are going in at Duval Village, you know, next door to the Sherlock. So, you know, see how they go there too. And we have had, like you said, some good comments, but, you know, it's planned and designed for, but if it's implemented or not is to be determined. But there may be better locations for sure. So it is interesting. It is up next door, and that will be, we were there for an inspection today, and a guy rode his bike through, and it didn't matter how many pieces of construction equipment were running around and people doing inspections. So hopefully they get used, and then we can see where we want some.
Thank you. Councilmember McHenry.
Thank you. Yeah, I was one of the.
Oops.
Sorry about that. I was one of the original ones too, who was very excited about the exercise equipment. Hearing some of the feedback from the community, not wanting it there, maybe it's not a great location, but I do think the positive feedback about the exercise equipment is more about just having a new option in Duval that maybe they don't have already. So I think for this particular project, I'm leaning toward, let's try and bring it down back to the basic, to bring the budget down, stick with, I like the lighting and safety improvements. For the exercise equipment, I do hope that we can keep in mind where we would have better places to put some in the future if we wanted to budget for it, just as a nice improvement to some parks. A lot of our parks seem to only service a certain age range, so it might be a fun idea to add elements like that in the future so that you have options for multi-ages at some of our parks.
Thank you. Very helpful. Other council members or staff that want to weigh in? Mayor Okerlander.
Thanks. You know, I've been on my vacation. I did a bunch of reading, and one of the books that I'm almost through is by Peter Kageyama, who's the author for The Love of Cities, and it's called The Emotional Infrastructure of Places. And there's an entire chapter dedicated to unique parks and features and how they bring community together. And one of the most important things that Mr. Kageyama talks about a lot in his books is thinking out of the box, taking small risks, and seeing what comes of it. In the case of exercise equipment, I think there is, you know, there's a legitimate concern about some of the younger folks. With the number of people I see running and riding their bikes and carrying heavy packs up and down the hill, my suspicion is that regardless of the location, that equipment would be heavily used by those of the proper age range. in that sense, it is an investment. We always have to worry about the fact of maintenance. That said, I do want to remind folks we have hundreds of homes literally coming into the community over the next several years, which will provide a long-term stable funding base. And we still have positions that have not been filled within the department as it stands. And I think that needs to be taken into account as well. And we have to think about the future and what is this going to do to enhance our community. Everything that you read when these types of futures go in provides more happiness for the community, more opportunity for togetherness. And I think that we have a unique opportunity here to start doing things out of the ordinary, especially during a time in the middle of a pandemic, which we don't expect to be even on the other side of it until at least next summer. And gyms are closed. There isn't opportunity for folks to go and do this kind of exercise indoors. So I do want folks to take a look at that. And if you, it's the emotional infrastructure, can't see it with that screen. Emotional Infrastructure Places has a lot of amazing stories from throughout the country where projects just like this really change the character of the city. And this is part of the challenge, especially when you're looking at design in a city, is it's not just about the cost, it's about the overall impact. And our staff and councils in the past have worked incredibly hard with the community over the last 20 years to come up with ideas and designs for our parks that bring community together. And, council will do what it wants on the exercise equipment. I'm glad to hear support now on the safety improvements. But I would also caution against changing the design of the sidewalk because, again, that provides a character that provides a nicer opportunity and recreational opportunity for those folks that are using that sidewalk. And Steve, I did want to ask a question as well. This is part of the discussion that we had kind of looking a few months ago in the maintenance of the area. And you can please refresh my memory and where we're at with that, because part of our discussion was by actually doing some more clearing on that property, it would take less to maintain based on equipment and information from our staff. And I would like you to expand a little bit on that, and also how our staff feels about maintaining this as a new facility. Because really, they're the ones that know their workload, and it's important to pay attention to that. But if they've bought on board, I think that's also something that council should be taking into serious consideration.
Steve, do you have input on that?
Yeah, unmute myself. Thank you. So as far as maintenance goes, everybody knows we struggle to try to provide those basic items consistently throughout town. I think Main Street is a good example. And honestly, this summer's opportunity we've had with 5 to 6 summer helpers and helping us keep up with the needs of weeding. And it may seem like a very simple feature that we can, kind of maintain our yards. And hey, the one positive side effect of COVID is people's yards look good because they're home taking care of them. And that's the thing, consistent care can keep that down. But once a weed bed is established, it takes months, if not years or longer to eradicate. So it is a handful, and not consistently being able to get to those spaces makes it difficult. Like I said, getting a jump on Main Street this year, it looks great right now. The weeds still come back because they have supplanted themselves in a way that, makes it difficult. But we have the labor to get to them, on a monthly basis, which it'd be better to have it more often than monthly, but we are, able to utilize the summer crew to the maximum extent feasible. Which, like you mentioned earlier on the other discussion, we still are cohabitating in the rec center as another space to provide that 4 to 5 person area, max person per area ratio. So it is helpful to have it. If we were to vacate it, we would figure it out, but it is making it easier. But I think the mowability rather than weedability is, it's unfortunate side effect, mechanized removal of items, i.e. mowing, is faster than weeding. So that makes it more enticing to prefer to maintain large areas with a mowing machine rather than a handheld weed eater or a hula hoe or whatever device we use. Certainly in an area that's been established. You know, we've looked at this. We'll go back to the minimum width necessary to maintain reasonable space between the walkway and however it meanders and the plantings, and then enough adjacency to keep weeds and blackberries back so they aren't continually creeping into the sidewalk. We have areas, you know, again, we try to get to in general that are just difficult, but time and labor do afford us that opportunity to do that. And we've made some good work this summer in many spaces, not just Main Street, on kind of the improved maintenance of, but it takes a lot of coordination, coordinating with homeowners. And sometimes you have to remember a homeowner isn't a homeowner, they're a tenant. So we have to track down, you know, 2 people. And a case in point is the 278th and 142nd curve. I don't know if anybody's walked through there lately. The one area we don't have sidewalks. I had to invest time, you know, a couple hours just trying to track down and meet with homeowners and advise them of what's happening, explain where property lines are, where they aren't. PSC space would be no different. Everybody understands normally where they are, but we still, you know, try to be calm and courteous on what we will do. We still say no to some others too, because everything grows and it always grows into the road or into the sidewalk. And normally homeowners are fairly amenable when we say, hey, we can do it a certain way, which is usually faster and more aggressive than selectively pruning and removing limbs, and not, you know, the whole bulk of a tree limb section at up to, you know, 8 feet high or whatever it needs to be for roadway travel. So, I mean, in the end, the long answer to your question, Mayor, is mowing certainly is more efficient for the amount of staff we have and the opportunity we have to mow the spaces we have, as opposed to weeding, because as we know, Washington grows weeds probably better than anywhere second to the Amazon, maybe. I mean, you grow weeds on concrete. I have another couple of tree start shoots I found of cottonwood growing out of our road, on a heavily traveled road. I was just walking it the other day. I'm like, what on earth? So weeds are hard to beat in our region. Really wet, nice and humid, and when it gets warm, it just goes. And I haven't gotten confirmation, but the power outage we had over the weekend were tree limbs and tree fall just based on heavy leaf canopy and hitting power lines. We had to shut Brewitt Road last week because the tree limbs arced and started a fire on the lines. So Aspen came out immediately, and they've been chasing those for the last few weeks, they've said. So there you go.
Well, Steve, thank you. That really is helpful. We appreciate perspective, especially for those that have to maintain. Councilmember Brunicki, did you have input?
So the only comment I want to add in regards to exercise equipment, really more about urban design and urban development, in that years ago we had a vision statement created for our city and vision planning and invested in all that. And we really saw the priority as community building. That was number one. And every time you went out and did polls or surveys or asked people, it always came back as the top thing. So that's what really was a catalyst to drive Main Street and how it developed. We could have done a Main Street with nothing and very little thought behind developing, you know, urban design that would enhance the community to the degree that it does today. But we added those features in the Main Street project: pocket parks, seating areas, the art element. All of that was in consideration to answer to our vision planning. So my only comment is, going forward, is when you create these public spaces, do you intend to continue with that vision plan? Do you want to create spaces that are enhancements? When they put the development in behind me, which Councilmember McHenry lives in, all they added was a simple little trail through the wetlands. And it was amazing how that was now the synergy to invite people to start walking around in the neighborhood. With COVID, of course, now we're seeing everybody walking around in the neighborhood. And so I personally do use exercise equipment. If you do a study in Australia to look at their trails and their open spaces and how they plan it, it's remarkable because they have that sort of feature throughout in many places. And it is on regular roadways, way more busy than the one we're talking about. But that's because people who are out walking and running like to incorporate a variety of workout with their aerobics as they're doing their sort of training or whatever have you. So I just think that before we just look at money only, if we did that with Main Street, we wouldn't have anything like what we have today. And I think we can all agree that what we have today for Main Street, it has been a great enhancement to the community and to the business community. So that's something to consider. I think the way you plan out your urban development and your open space is critical. And I like to always base it on what the citizens said in the vision planning. And that's how I usually make my decision on these things.
Thank you. Other council members, Councilmember McHenry.
I just wanted to follow up on some of those points. I think in our first meeting where we talked about this, Mayor, I had mentioned the same author and how things like this are love notes to a city and its citizens. I don't hear per se anyone saying they don't want exercise equipment. I think I hear more of the questioning of location and timing. So my hope, or I guess one of my questions, we had talked about possibly there's preparation work that happens before installation. So was there any sort of phase in mind? Like if we didn't want to purchase the equipment yet, Director Laniszewski, I think you had mentioned talking about preparing the area of where they would go in the stations. And then if we chose to do that, but not purchase equipment and then changed our minds later, I know it's kind of crazy, but just throwing it out there, we could put a bench there or something. I don't know. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the preparation of those areas in case that was even a possibility for other council members to consider.
So it's kind of a two-part question. The easiest approach is if we're going to do it, to incorporate it. Secondly, if we aren't interested now, maybe based on finances, and we want to see how everything else rolls out, this is an installation that, you know, the city's maintenance public works crew could do. There's nothing too taxing. So there is that opportunity down the road. And I think three, the thing to consider is not only us, but the homeowners. We went through a process. We've advertised what we're going to do or intend to do, at least through alternates. You know, if we don't do it, they may believe it may never happen, which they may be happier about than not. So I think just something to be cautious of. If we go back, we may want to engage them in that neighborhood on what may or may not be happening, but food for thought on what we would do. So
one last question I have, and I guess we could talk about this later. I don't want to, you know, go too off topic, but in my head, things like this could really benefit from the Parks Committee reforming and or reconvening, but I understand that would be a huge workload. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That's been something that's been on my mind too. How can we involve the community? I mean, I think it's great we look at projects like this, and I think overall it's a great idea. But just getting that feedback in a more timely way from citizens and really staying engaged with them proactively.
yeah, and I blah, blah, blah. Some of the new tools that we do have with Office 365 and some of their survey opportunities, I don't know if any of you have used that at all. They're fantastic. They're super easy.
Yeah.
We have worked with our IT group to make those administrable to others outside our organization, because originally it was just like internal. So they've opened that up, and it's really cool. You insert your specific questions, you've got your answers, it sends you a report, it has graphics, and anybody can do it. Someone as dumb as me can do it without help. I mean, it's perfect. So I think things like that are really useful in the future too. So something for us to consider.
Are you talking about Microsoft Forms?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's
So
great.
it's so easy. So
Is that something we would consider for this project, quickly putting out a survey on some of the specifics? Or are we too close on, like you mentioned, the deadline coming up of the
Probably.
timing of it?
yeah, probably too close. I think whatever decision we have, we go with for the
Okay.
longer near term, couple years.
Thanks.
Other feedback from council members. Councilmember Lingle.
I'm really glad that Councilmember McHenry brought up the bigger picture issue around parks, because a lot of what we struggle with when we look at these bids is the uncertainty of our financial future, not just relative to COVID, but because of so many other things that we know are in our future, and aging infrastructure, more population. I mean, there's just a long list. And so it's hard for me to make some of these smaller decisions without rethinking things like parks, and how do we get scale in the parks that we have, where our maintenance dollars might go a little further. And I think about McCormick Park sometimes. I mean, there's so much potential there to do some more things, and we just haven't had the opportunity to really drill down on those. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm just super glad she brought that up, because it really isn't a question of whether this type of exercise equipment might not be enjoyed. It's for me, it's really about location, which is why I made the comment. To me, it's not about money. It's more about location. And I think we should do something like this, but I just think it needs to be somewhere else.
Thank you. Well, I guess I haven't weighed in, so I'll take just a moment. I do want to tell you how much I appreciate Director Ledaszewski. Steve, you have just, I appreciate you taking our questions. This is a very engaged council, and I'm sure from a mayor and director standpoint, it can be a little bit more of a challenge than not having a council that's as engaged. But I think it also allows us to listen to all these different perspectives and represent all of our citizens that we speak with. So thank you for being patient and doing a good job of trying to just talk with us up front and provide info. And Mayor, I wanted to say I really appreciate your vision. You know, for us, we kind of come down to the money sometimes and figuring out, is this the best use, but you have a vision that I really appreciate. And I think our citizens do as well. Whether we can meet all those hopes and visions yet to be seen, but I think it's very healthy for us as a community to, you know, people are going to drive by this. So here's my perspective. I love this project overall. I can live with the exercise equipment and I could do without it. I think there's some parks that might benefit if some of it was there, but this is a major thoroughfare through street for the city. We have very few that transverse the entire north-south corridor. There's really Main Street 3rd. You could probably say Baton Road, but really this 275th is the main one. A lot of people are going to travel it. One of my main goals in life is to get rid of blackberries in the world. I love eating them. I just don't like them in my yard and next to all the streets. And it's a lifelong goal and project. I say that. I love the natural look. This is an interesting project. If we were talking 2 feet, none of us would be concerned. If we were talking 100 yards, probably all of us would be concerned. This one just happens to be about 50 feet. So it's not 2 feet, not 100 yards. I mean, it's a tough one. I've heard from enough homeowners that would love to get rid of the blackberries, the rodents, and the trash that's kind of accumulated over a lifetime in those blackberries up by the fence. So I have no problem taking those out. You know, I do ache for citizens that have had the privacy. They've had 50 feet of natural look. I love the natural look. So I know this is a challenge, and that part we've had to really think hard about. And I think if we can do some things with landscaping to help provide that buffer. I like clearing out the blackberries for some other reasons. We have bobcat, we have bear out there. And when you have young people walking, you want to see those ahead of time. And when that brush is right up next to the sidewalk, it's a challenge. I actually like the meandering. My goal on any sidewalk is, can I hold my wife Sue's hand and we can walk side by side on the sidewalk and not have to be like a train one behind the other. And this one looks like it's going to meet that. Very supportive of the safety improvements. that alone, I think, whether it was a separate project or part of this one, is really necessary to improve safety at 150th. That's just a huge part of this. I'd also like to just recognize Daniel Kinney as our city attorney. He provided really direct feedback, answered our questions promptly. Mayor, thank you for supporting that and helping get that conversation started. It really answered some of the key questions about gift of public funds, PSC property, the street lighting. That just helped educate all of us as council, and very appreciative. Because we have a grant, we're planning on moving forward with the project, but until we get to finally see the cost pieces and try to understand what we can afford, it'll be nice to get that moving and get this wrapped up by February so we can keep that grant. We don't want to give that $200,000 back. Well, that's all I had on this. I think it was a good discussion. It doesn't mean we won't have more questions, and especially when the new bids come through. Steve, do you have a sense of when we'll see those for council?
Yeah, the bids open on the 25th, and we hope to turn it around immediately for the September 1st meeting.
Oh, perfect. I love it. Well, thank you again for all this. Well, we do have one last item, and it's 6:32, so we have about 25 minutes. And I show that we had Director Thomas for the department updates, community development, and planning. Do we have enough time, Laura, to actually do this?
Yes.
Okay, especially if I quit talking. Okay, I'm done. You've got the floor.
So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my presentation, and I do see that we have 4 attendees. So welcome to the party as well. This presentation is essentially being broken up into 2 parts. Community development includes both planning and building. And I'm going to do the planning portion this evening, but kind of drum roll first. Our building official, our interim building official, Brian, went to training last week and took his last building official test and passed it with flying colors. So we're super excited about that. Like, I mean, literally like cartwheels in the department. And then also really great news is we have over 20 applications for our in-house position. So we are super excited. I mean, it's been a really good week. So I'm going to pull up the presentation.
And while that comes up, Brian is a long-term employee who started in Public Works. So he knows, he's very familiar with the Public Works side of things as well as now the building. So he's an awesome asset. I couldn't be happier for him in the city.
Thank you, Steve. So this evening, as I said, we're just going to talk about the planning department. It's a pretty high-level presentation, but I definitely have some time allotted for questions. So obviously, you can tell that this picture of our entire team was taken during what I call COVID and the pandemic. So you have Troy Davis over on your right. He's our senior planner. You have Brian Keller, who's our interim building official over on the left. James Lee is our building inspector. He's just about a year through, obviously, his training as well now. He's in the middle. And then to the right of James is Melanie Young, our long-standing permit specialist. And then I'm over to the left of James. But I just wanted you to see our mighty, powerful team. So this year has definitely been a challenge, and I'm not sure if everybody remembers that we started out with snow, then went straight to floods, and went to pandemic, where a lot of us were working from home, to now a bustling development season. So I just thought that was kind of good to recapture that, because it seems like a decade ago since we had that storm. So the items that I will talk about this evening are current development, pre-applications, GIM is general information meeting, construction and inspection, project review, code enforcement, policy work, comp plan and annexations, budget, our new world, which is really our new normal, and 21, 22 and beyond. So as many of you definitely know, we have a lot of current development. This is just a snapshot of our map that was updated in June. We'll be actually updating it again in September. And so we try to do it quarterly and get it up online quarterly as well. We really do want to start removing the project build out, but we'll keep a tracking history of that as well. We'd also like to update the matrix, kind of rework that a little bit. And then we also did a small news article and an insert for our community that'll go out for this September's utility billing that has the current development map and the pre-application map and the article. So we're really excited about that. That was completed today. We also have a pre-application map and in general, what we call a general information map as well. Again, we're going to update this quarterly and we'll remove projects as they start to move to another list or build out. We're also going to relook at the matrix for that. And again, it was in a utility, it's going to be in the utility insert. So this was done in June, and even since this time, now that we're in August, we've had an additional 4 either pre-application or general information meetings just since this was updated in June. So as soon as we get them done, they seem to be outdated pretty quickly. So let's talk just a little bit about construction and inspection. Obviously, we all know that it's been a really busy season. We have Duval Village that we're actually out very actively in the field right now. At final platted last year, and they had a rough winter out on that site. As many of you know, we had a lot of rain out there. So this summer, they re-engaged the site. Have actually now completed their lift station, which was a key component of pulling their permits, but we're also finalizing what we call our final plat inspection list. So planning, building, and Public Works. This has been a really active site for us to do inspections. In fact, Public Works was out there today. I was out there last week. I'll be out there again on Thursday. So that left-hand slide is Troy out doing inspections probably about 2 weeks ago. Obviously, we do a lot of the planting type inspections. And then the middle is just kind of a snapshot of the area that we were at is in that lower right-hand corner of that middle slide. And then we also have a very active site on Big Rock Road, which is phase 1 and 2 of Toll Brothers development. So we're seeing a lot of development inspections and reviews out there as well. We're finishing up North Hill. They're in their last couple of lots, but right after that, we'll be doing performance and maintenance bond review and release. So it'll go into its final active state. We're also really busy with construction review. As soon as we finish a hearing, they usually submit with drawings pretty quickly, and they have been following that model. So 65 Degrees, Thayer, Batten Creek, and Darcy's that have all been approved this season have also come in with construction drawings. So it's been a well, we already know it's a pretty record-breaking year for our team. We also keep track through a spreadsheet, which there's basically a small snippet of it. So we've talked about this before, so I don't want to belabor it. We are continuing to have issues to try and keep on top of our timelines for our reviews that are 90 to 180 days. We're hoping that when we get a new staff member in, that we start to get back to closer to that 90 to 180 days. We have several projects that we're working on right now that are queued up for hearing. So the Collins project, Redemption, Thomas Nolf, all have pending hearings in September and October. And then we'll have another handful that'll be November, December, and January. We have a couple of projects that have come in recently that are fairly active. In fact, we have a meeting with one of them tomorrow. So Acres of Diamonds is working on a project, and that's really more redevelopment of their site. And then we also have a project that came in off of 145th Street where First Avenue will meet their alignment. And so that's a mixed use project. We also have a city park application that will be coming in. So kind of for those of you who haven't been on council, several years ago, as part of Rio Vista, we entered into a development agreement to get a city park out of that area, and it's getting ready to be queued up to go through its site plan review process. And so Steve and I and our team have been meeting and talking with them as they prepare their application materials. Probably one of the more challenging items that has come our way that we weren't necessarily prepared for to see this year. As many of you know, one of our projects on the north side of town, known as Willow Ridge Lot 21, has started and stopped on several occasions. That project is now under new ownership, and they're going to come back through the pre-application process and submit a site plan review application. The building permits out there expired along with their site plan review application. Their plat is still vested and good through October, so they have an opportunity, a pretty short window, to get in their application. It will essentially be this exact same application because those 4 buildings are already in some state in the ground. It's a lot of paper. It was a lot of paperwork the first time, and it's going to be a lot of paperwork the second time. So we're happy that somebody's buying it and that they're going to finish out the project. That's the good news. Project review. So let's just chat for a second on the new city park. So down at the bottom, you have the Walden Park, and we've been working with Toll to reduce maintenance. We've heard a lot from council and the mayor and finance, all the departments, and specifically even public works, like how do we minimize the maintenance in these new parks that we're taking on? And quite honestly, that usually comes from paring down the landscaping and doing more mowing versus plantings that you have to do a more weeding type maintenance on. So we've been working with Toll Brothers to do that. They resubmitted a plan a couple of weeks ago. Steve and I got through the infrastructure part of it, and we're finishing up on the landscape portion of it to see, is that pared down enough? Is that something that's reasonable that we can maintain long term? So we just call it fine tuning the landscaping. Obviously, we want to keep the integrity of what was provided to the community through the process. So those kind of hardscape improvements.
Can't hear you, Laura.
Yeah, did you guys lose her?
Laura, Mike Remington, we lost your audio. Not sure why.
She's not muted, so I'm not sure what happened.
It happened earlier today. I think it's her headset potentially.
Yeah, Laura, we still lost your audio.
Okay, I'm back on. Can you hear me?
You're back. Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where did you last hear me so I don't repeat myself?
Well, that's a dangerous question. We heard every last word. Actually, it was just in the last probably 60 seconds.
Oh, okay. So I'll just start with Rio Vista. So we're working with them on fine tuning their park as well. And so that park is set to be a more naturalized park. They're obviously worried about construction costs. They only get so much park impact fee credit. So we're considering, we're working with them on that. So building TI design and review. So like we said, it's a record year. We've reviewed over 175 permits this year in-house. 140 of them have been residential on top of the rest of the work that we do within our department. We also have done design review, which is a pretty extensive process with Rio Vista and Toll Brothers. We've had some small lot development review. as well. And then, not as much, but we've had a lot of additions and TIs and remodels. We continue to see challenges in general with our projects because lots are getting smaller, so you have impervious surface and setback, and a developer is going to push really hard to build the biggest house they can on that lot. So it's a lengthy exercise that we go through. Sorry, let me see. So annexations, so hopefully everybody remembers we've completed the 10% petition for Riverview School District, and we expect that their 60% petition will come in probably the end of September. That typically takes about 4 months to process. We also have the parcel to the south side, which is the top image. We're in the final stages of completing the review to issue an EIS amendment. So that would be the documents, the MOU required us to go through an EIS amendment process. And so the school district submitted all their materials, and we just completed reviewing them in the last week and have shared our preliminary comments with the school district. I would expect that their petition will come in by the end of October. So let's talk a little bit about policy. This is where we've honestly struggled for years in our community to have the staffing and also to have the financial resources to do this. So we completed the interim flood regulations. So that's great news. That's a mandate. So what I'm trying to do is put where we have a mandate so you can see that. We'll finish the final floodplain regulations in December. The sign code is something that we had budgeted for this biennium that we have not yet started. So I call that pending. And that comes out of a Supreme Court case. And so we still consider that. It's not a 100% mandate. It's more of like a risk analysis. And then we also have the 5G wireless facility policy that we need to work on. And that's really something because of an FCC ruling, but also because our wireless facility policy is over 20 years old. One of the items that we wanted to do this year was to do a review and audit of our tree policy that we haven't gotten to. And then we still have one more item that we're working on, but we're waiting still for DOE comments, and that's the SMP. That is another mandate. And then we've completed the 2020 comp plan docket process, but now we're finishing up the actual amendment process. So that was the workshop that you had earlier in the evening. And then we're also already in the beginning of the docket process for the 2021 comprehensive plan amendments. So we have, kind of looking forward, and budget planning and building have completed our budget requests. We're in the process. Obviously, I announced that we have a lot of interested applicants. So we'll see how many we get by the end of the month. That's the cutoff. And then I do have what I call kind of that unfunded policy work that we always have kind of going into every budget. And this is something that we work with the mayor, administration, and finance every year. So permit tracking software is one of those items. We do have some partial funding this year. We had budgeted about $25,000. That's unspent. What we have kind of knocking on our door as well is the 2024 GMA update, which is our comprehensive plan. That's a mandate. Historically, we start about 2 years prior to that. So that means that we would be doing work in the last year of our biennium, and we'll be working on a scope of work. My guess is by the end of next year at the latest to bring forward to council through a budget amendment. We also need to look towards updating our annexation plan. That was last done, I believe, in 2005. Our Parks, Trails, and Open Space update is still pending and unfunded, and that plan is from essentially we adopted it in 2009, but we started that project a couple of years before that. And then we need to do a full zoning code scrub as well. So one thing is, you know, obviously every department is under a new normal. So working under COVID, it definitely was really challenging at the beginning. Now it has become easier, but at the same time, I think the mental health component of it is challenging because we now have families that are having to figure out how to school their children and work. There's just a lot of things that we're going to be faced with over probably the next 6 months. The work from home model has been a shining star for community development. So I've been really happy with the work and the performance. And in fact, I really believe that we've actually gotten more work done out of planning by doing some work at home, especially from our senior planner. I think that because of COVID and that some of the uncertainty in the economy, funding is going to be a huge challenge for doing a lot of the planning work that we've been talking about for several years. So what would we like to restart? And it's so funny because it was talked about a little bit this evening. And I talked to the mayor about this before I just push something through a slide. We really need to start our land use committee again.
Yep.
And maybe what we'll do is we'll limit it to maybe once a month starting at some point. The Parks Committee, that one's going to be really tough, but I think if we're going to move forward on parks and prioritization, then we really do need to probably look towards that committee. So I kind of finished for the most part. The next one is questions. So if anybody has questions, now is the opportunity. I can also take questions if we don't have enough time at the council meeting as well.
Well, thank you, Laura. Incredible amount of work that you're getting done with your team. Thank you for all that update. I will suggest to council members, I'm happy to take questions, but I would suggest that we hold off until the council meeting. That way we could all have a 7-minute break just to stand up and stretch. So with that, if no one disagrees, we'll adjourn our committee of the whole, and we'll see you at council meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you.